Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, reformers kill reform. Also, the V-Team takes a look at prison schemes. And Ivey's boys need to learn some lessons.
I don't blame myself. See, Mr. Gitz, most people never have to face the fact that at the right time and the right place, they're capable of anything.
Capable of anything. Yeah, pretty much. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
How's everybody?
Hello.
Good. How are you doing this morning, Jack?
Jack has a lovely tie.
3 more payments.
Oh, well, almost done. That's good. Not to beat a dead horse or to beat any kind of horse or to beat a rented mule, but Jack, this story about Kay Ivey being in the hospital in Colorado, it shouldn't have had legs, but they gave it legs by not being forthright in the beginning. We were told that she didn't have a stroke. Of course, we never said she had a stroke. Then we were told that she was not in the hospital for 4 days. Lo and behold, that's true. She was in the hospital for 3 days. But this has come about over time. And it questions, at least in my mind, the security of this administration and why they're holding back on just telling the truth.
Well, you know, we really don't know what the truth is,
Right.
but altitude sickness, I would not imagine, is a 3-day hospital visit. Now, I could be wrong. Did they not confirm to y'all initially that she did have stroke-like symptoms?
Well, they didn't confirm it, but the people that were involved at the time
Who were in the party, okay.
Yeah, that she had stroke-like symptoms, that she was admitted to the hospital. They said 3 days. 4 days now, we're hearing 3. But Beth, it took them so long to just come up with the answers.
Right, and I took a class in crisis PR at Auburn, and we studied all these huge, political blunders, and the one thing that they emphasized to us was just be honest, just be transparent, and when you tell people what's going on and you say, okay, here's what happened, you don't dance around the story, it usually comes and goes pretty quickly. And the part of this that blows my mind is it was like, well, was she in the hospital 4 days? No, haha, gotcha. She was in there for 3 days.
Yeah.
So, if they had just come out and said, yes, she was hospitalized in Colorado, she got dehydrated, they wanted to make sure she was stable. The woman's 85, for God's sake.
72.
Okay, same thing. But I know when I'm 72, I won't feel the same way, but she's getting on up there, and it's time that, her health needs to be something that's taken seriously. And if they would just disclose it, it would not have been an issue.
And Susan, we never meant any harm to the governor, but we felt people needed to know if she's having TIAs or health problems that she gets admitted to the hospital. People have a right to know.
They do, because we depend on her judgment as the ultimate leader of our state. Her judgment in entering into contracts, into signing bills. So this should be, if it's not a concern of all of the citizens of the state. And if she had just come out and said, like Beth said, okay, I had TIAs, they were minor, I've corrected all of that, this would not have been a 3-week story.
Right.
Now it's a 3-week story and continue.
Or said originally, I had altitude sickness. It took them 10 days to come up with altitude sickness.
I know when I worked at the Administrative Office of Courts as a public information officer, Chief Justice Perry Hooper had a TIA one morning getting dressed for work, and his doctor told him to meet him at the hospital. He was in for like a day. He came home. We issued a press release right that day because we didn't feel that it would be right thing to do to sit on that and not let the public know.
Well, I mean, the people that were involved at the time said that Steve Pelham, her chief of staff, covered it up, wanted it covered up, and that
threatened people,
and that the trooper involved was moved to a license department or a license office in Troy. Of course, they said he was promoted, Susan.
They did. Well, when we went back and looked at the financials, he was promoted. He got a $50 a week raise. Now he's got a considerable amount of overtime since then. Not that there's any connection, but I didn't see $50 is not a promotion, as far as I know. Now, we are going to go back and look at some records and see where we can find out exactly what did.
If he's not having to deal with Governor Ivey anymore, maybe it was a promotion.
Yeah, believe me.
Well,
but honestly,
she's tough to work for.
we've got reason to believe that Boy Scout up there and all them, they've got her propped up like maybe Weekend at Bernie's or something. And so maybe there is a reason they're trying to hide it. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see her give a press presence for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time.
I have to admit, the more they cover it up, the more concerned I get about how her health really is.
Well,
that's beginning.
We all pray that she's well and can do her job.
Of course.
Unfortunately, the people she surrounded herself with cause us to distrust, and the way that they've handled this situation is less than honest. That's for absolutely sure. Mary Scott Hunter, Jack, one of your favorite folks, has entered into the fray. She wants to run. She's running for lieutenant governor.
The good news is she won't be on the state board of. Well, let's see if she loses. She might. Is her term up?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Really, I'm sorry. I'm not a fan. I think she's done a miserable job on the State Board of Education. Done some sneaky stuff behind the scenes, too. So I don't think we can trust her to be lieutenant governor.
Well, I think she's a smart woman. I think she's ambitious. I think she's tough. But, Susan, there's a lot of folks got some problems with her.
There's a lot of folks that have some problem with her, especially over the Pouncey incident. And that was very telling. The day that she announced the comments on the AL.com report, there was not a positive one in all of them that evening. So that tells you something. People still have a burr in their side about that.
Is she a BCA candidate, Beth, or do we know?
Of course she is. I mean, and I'm looking at it, and I haven't seen the money move, but everything that she's ever done has been backed by BCA. But I'm looking at this, she's saying she's ready to move on to bigger projects. Look at our schools. Look at Alabama's public education. She has been at the forefront of trying to fix that, and it's done nothing but head further downhill. They've lied about graduation rates. Is this really somebody we want a heartbeat away from the governor? I mean, absolutely not. She's not demonstrated the competency.
Well, the interesting thing is now we realize how important the lieutenant governor is. Now, I personally would like to see them come up with legislation next session that reinstates the power to the lieutenant governor. So we actually have a lieutenant governor doing something, Jack.
I agree.
This placeholder thing is just crazy.
Well, they did it when Steve Windham was elected lieutenant governor. He was Republican. Both the House and Senate were Democrats, and they changed the rules and neutered him, basically. And they've not restored the powers to that office, and it's a disgrace.
Basically, the only power that the lieutenant governor has is presiding over the Senate. That's it.
Right.
Right, and they want to do away with that, too. But I think they need to go just the opposite and say, okay, let's empower the lieutenant governor to get some things done that are being left undone, not just waiting for somebody to die or get impeached or resign.
Either way, I think that whoever runs for lieutenant governor should have to count to 18 publicly so that we can see that they actually can count a quorum. And that's the one requirement I'd like to see in the next lieutenant governor.
I second that motion.
Expecting too much.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think here we're hearing Will Sellers may get in. Not Will Sellers, but Will Ainsworth may get in.
Away.
Well, who else is
Rusty
getting?
Glover.
Rusty Glover's in.
Yeah, he's in.
Perry Hooper,
Scott.
I've heard.
Yeah, Perry Hooper.
I heard Perry
Didn't
Hooper
you say that?
Jr. is taking a look
with
at
the
it.
Democrats, we've got 17 people trying to run for governor. I wish somebody would run down for lieutenant governor.
Yeah, they might have a chance. Well, we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with news and analysis. Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Susan, on May 11th, they came out with an interim proposal findings with this task force that's looking at the budget, ways of fixing the budget so we don't have these constant shortfalls. There were quite a few surprises in there, but it looks like they're on to something big if they'll just follow through with it.
Well, I've got to say, I'm glad to see that they're taking a comprehensive look at this. Instead of just saying we run in here and unearmark this and unearmark that, they're looking at the budget as a whole, how we get our tax revenue, how the tax revenue is spent, where it's earmarked and all of that, instead of just looking at pieces of it. I'm very encouraged by what they're doing.
I mean, Beth, one of the things they're doing is they're actually comparing data.
Right.
And not just listening to lobbyists or anecdotal. And one of the amazing things is that they found is that we actually have the money for the general fund to do what we need to do. We just can't spend it priority-wise. There's no ability.
Right, and when you look at our budget, I mean, a good half of it's eaten up between prisons and Medicaid. And so then when you start looking at what's left, okay, we've got to earmark this for Forever Wild and this for here and this for there. There's really not a whole lot of room left to play with it, or we have to start cutting agencies out. So we need to find a way to take, either if we can't bring in more money, at least take what we have and loosen it up a little bit so when we have these crises, we can react to them.
Well, and that's one of the things, Jack, you and I were talking about earlier, that every year we have $4.8 billion that goes to special taxes, incentives, these special classes of business who get breaks that no one else gets. And they're looking at maybe evaluating those and maybe taking some of them away.
Well, I think that's probably a pretty good idea. I mean, we always want to bring business and industry here. And offering incentives is one thing, but to do like the ThyssenKrupp thing in Mobile, which blew up my face, I mean, that was insane. We really do. We're looking at antiquated ways of raising money and spending money and how they're isolated in this budget. And I mean, we just need to overhaul the whole thing.
Right. I mean, Susan, we've got budget tax breaks that go back 30 and 40 years for companies that no longer really need these tax incentives.
Exactly. And the other thing that bothers me is there's no metrics to see if these incentives actually work before we start giving away other incentives to other companies coming in. Yeah, we need to encourage the economic development, but we also need to look at, is it working for us? Is this actually working?
Well, they did exactly that in Louisiana. They said back, a couple of years ago, they said we're giving away all this money. Let's look at who's getting it and what profit we're making as a state. And they found that a lot of them just were money pits that they were shoveling money into, Beth.
Right. Well, and there's two parts to that, because one is that, if we give a company $1 billion to come in and create 500 new jobs and they only create 100 new jobs, we don't have any way to hold them accountable for those 400 that they said they would, that we bought basically and they didn't provide. But on the other hand, I mean, if you look at what companies need when they come into an area, they need good schools, they need quality infrastructure, they need all these things that money can't buy in a check to a company. Right. We have to start looking at that on a state level and making Alabama an appealing place for people to live and raise a family, because companies come with employees that have families that need to live here and grow up here.
Well, and that's something we've talked about. I know that wasn't on the agenda, but I think it's a good point. This bill to the infrastructure bill just died because, look, people don't understand that. They're not understanding, hey, we've got to raise gas tax and to build roads and bridges so we have the infrastructure. But Jack, we give away all this money. I think if we actually looked at some of these giveaways, we probably wouldn't need as much tax on the gas.
That's probably true. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the gas tax, but I understand it. I mean, we have to do something about our infrastructure. Our roads are in terrible shape.
Yeah.
I mean, terrible shape.
I'd like to calculate, the bus driver that has to drive 17 miles around a bridge to get to a student. How many times is that occurring in Alabama on a daily basis? And how much gas is that costing us as opposed to, raising this gas tax? I mean, there's got to be some equilibrium in there somewhere.
Well, and looking at it too, and they just closed down a major intersection, a major interchange in Birmingham because the interstate keeps falling out from under cars. Like, we can't have that. And then you start looking at all of these other things. We don't even have an ability to use gas tax money for public transportation so that we can get rail up and down 65. How great would that be? I mean, we've got to start looking to the future.
And you talk about people wanting to come here. I mean, you look at some of these big corporations that are in Birmingham, their people go to Atlanta for entertainment or get on a plane and go to New York City or somewhere else because there's nothing. It's not a destination. No one goes to Birmingham and goes, woohoo, we're in Birmingham, right?
I love Birmingham.
Well, there ain't no ham like Birmingham. Jack,
It could be better, though.
It could be much better.
We got a couple minutes here, and I know this a very serious situation. We've had these conversion camps where young people have been brought in and basically some of them tortured to try to convert them to being more civilized or not gay or whatever. Ivey signed a law that said they have to be regulated. Then we got a lot of pushback saying, well, this is the state intruding in the church's domain. And then we got another gentleman, Mr. Krebs, out of Birmingham, who's a well-known figure, saying, oh, no, do not hide behind the cross to try to torture children. I mean, that's basically what he said. Now, I know they all don't do that, but Steve McMillan got this bill done, and you...
Well, there are enough cases that warrant having regulation. I don't care if you are a faith-based camp. If you mistreat people, you're going to have consequences. And I applaud Steve McMillan for getting this legislation passed. And I'm sorry if these church folks are up in arms, but they've got to do a better job of protecting these kids and these. I mean, if you're going to reform somebody, you have to look after them. It's like our prison system sucks because it's not reformatory, it's punitive.
Right. Well, and these children are not of consent. So it's their parents' consent where they go. So that factors into this as well. I mean, these children are being put into situations that could be terrible, and we have no way of knowing.
Well, you know,
regulated.
It sort of reminds me of the concentration camps or what the communist China did, these re-education camps. I mean, there's nothing but trying to brainwash children into being something they're not.
Right,
you can't put a naked kid in a dark room with a bare light bulb hanging down and isolate him and expect that kid to come out unscathed because it's just not going to work that way.
Right. I mean, our suicide rates among LGBT youth are outrageous. It's abhorrent that we let this exist in our society. And a lot of the reason why that is because these kids are taught to be ashamed of who they are. And these camps, if they are going to teach children how to cope with living in a society that often doesn't accept them, that's okay. But if they're going to teach kids to be ashamed and to feel scared, absolutely not. They have to be regulated.
Well, I like to think that the way to anybody's heart, especially children, is love, not hate, not condemnation, not making them feel bad, but
and not judging them.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll see. Ivey did the right thing. Thank God for Steve McMillan for getting that passed, and thanks for Josh and everybody for writing about it. Again, we respect the opinion of our faith-based groups. Here, we just happen to differ. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis. Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. A year or so ago, Brandon Mosley, one of our star reporters, did a very in-depth investigative piece on how correctional officers and inmates were engaged in various schemes to get money out of inmates' parents or inmates' family. And this last week, Susan, we had 5 correctional officers arrested and charged with doing just that.
We did, and all 5 of those officers came out of Elmore Correctional Facility. We have multiple correctional facilities across the state. I can't imagine how this is going to multiply out. But here's the scheme. They're doing it with these Blue Dot cards through Walmart and whatever. The guards bring in the Blue Dot cards, they bring in drugs, and they bring in cell phones. The inmates take these cell phones and set up these accounts online to purchase items for the correctional officers, like home electronics, cruises, all of these things.
Well, it's a pretty effective method because it's national. I mean, it is widespread. This program, this investigation began under Spencer Collier. I think it got slowed down after he was relieved of duty improperly by Robert Bentley. Beth, how's he doing down there in Selma?
Oh, he's having a blast. He's getting to basically try to start from scratch, putting the city back together. So he's having a good old time. We had an issue where about 200 plus guns got taken out of evidence, and he acted quick and cleaned it up, and he's doing a great job.
Good. We're happy that he's happy. He is a good lawman and sorely missed.
What do we expect out of our prison system? We don't pay those guards anything.
Right.
And they're probably not properly trained, I mean, if the truth were known. But it's pitiful that we've got corruption in this state, from the governor's office to the speaker's office to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and now to our prison system, and God knows what is in between. It's just amazing. I grew up in this state, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's a longtime Republican activist. He said, you know, I've just never seen it like this. It's worse than it's ever been. And the Republicans are in charge. That's the sad part.
Yeah, I do have to say, for Commissioner Dunn, he is trying to clean up a lot of these things.
I'm sure.
And get these officers trained the way they should be trained, and especially in crisis management and stuff.
But, and I agree with you on that, but the thing is, we have for years, for decades, neglected the prison system, the correction system, all the way, the criminal justice system, I should say, all the way down from how we handle sentencing, how we handle the intake, and all this, and we've ignored it at our own peril. And what we've done is created a generation of disposable youths that have been in prison, will probably stay in prison for the rest of their life. And it's simply because we just didn't give a damn, Beth.
Well, no,
Right.
we have to wait for the federal government to breathe down our throat, breathe down our backs to say, do something about it or else. And we're got that gun to our head again.
And I get that people don't care about prisoners. But if they come out of prison more of a criminal than they went in, we ought to care, right, Beth?
Well, and Jack nailed it earlier when he said our prisons aren't rehabilitative, they're punitive. And when you take people in there, you've got people in prison on bounce checks. Those aren't hardened criminals. I'm sorry, they're moms and dads who are trying to pay the bills. And so you've got people like that. They go into prison, they come out with a record, and you've got guards who are in there as, basically zookeepers kind of a role, not counselors, not life coaches. They're not, we need to start looking at how can we shift this so that instead of guards and inmates, we've got, partnerships and relationships being formed that make it so that these people can come out of prison better than when they went in.
Well, and for most of them, that's not real difficult. But I think the thing is, we have to be smart on crime. We have to be smart on sentencing. We've made some tremendous strides, but there's a long, long way to go. I tell you, Jack, you were talking about this. I was talking to a long-time political operative and a Republican who said, you know what, I never thought I'd say this, but until, we got rid of Mike Hubbard, that was a good start. Bentley is gone, that's pretty good. But until we get rid of the influence of Riley Inc., the former governor, Bob Riley's influence, and Billy Canary is gone from BCA, we will never, ever change the state from being number 47th, 48th, or 49th, because they thrive when we suffer.
Well, I think the legislature gave Billy Canary a pretty resounding act this last session, too. So he definitely needs to go. He's not effective for BCA. He made a lot of legislators mad by trying to get in their face. And it's just time. We've got to change this state.
Well,
Otherwise,
we need to make sure the lobbyists get a message that they don't run the state either. And he's one that has been very heavy-handed in going over there and threatening lawmakers to find somebody to run against them or whatever if they don't vote a certain way. That's just, I'm sorry. These days have gone. Mike Hubbard is gone. There's none of this anymore. We thought.
Well, but a lot of that, though, I think comes down to, the fact that Billy Canary can walk into a legislator's office and say, I'll find somebody to run against you, and can put that threat on people. We've got to have voters in this state who pay attention and know what's going on. And so we can't get too mad about all this if we're not paying attention enough to care and read and follow. I mean, this team has exposed every dirty rock underbelly in the state, and Mike Hubbard was still reelected in Lee County for his House seat and reelected Speaker of the House.
Well,
we've all got to step up and do our part.
Well, and people do not pay attention, and somebody said one time, well, people don't care. I said, well, we care for them. That's our job. We have to care for them. But I agree, until Billy Canary's gone, you've got that whole crew is still in there, and they thought they could run the state forever. And I've heard that some big politicos and top CEOs now have said, okay, enough, Canary's got to go. And they're looking at bringing in one of the former top CEOs of one of our greater businesses here for an interim to straighten this out and get it back to, as you said, the days when BCA
when it was a
respected.
preeminent organization. And I do remember when we had Associated Industries of Alabama, AIA, and the Alabama Alliance of Business and Industry, and they were kind of rival organizations. They merged and created the Business Council of Alabama and brought chambers of commerce in as well. And I used to work for the Texas Association of Business, which is like the BCA, but we didn't employ those kind of tactics to get our legislation passed.
Well, I just don't even understand it sometimes in Alabama, because some of these guys, you go in their office and threaten them, they ought to take you out back and show you what the threat means to them.
I know a few senators that would.
Yeah, well, they need to do it. I tell you, I don't think they'd back up Connie Rowe 2 inches.
No, they certainly would not.
No.
You think Billy Canary's scare Connie?
No. She's
No.
tougher than a $2 steak.
Right.
I want to see
Paul Sanford, go ahead and threaten him, I dare you.
Yeah, I want to see one of them look up to Isaac Horton and say, "No, I need you to do this."
Well, that's what I'm saying. They've threatened us 7 ways to Sunday, and we're just like, really?
Okay.
We don't care. We're capable of anything. Well, we're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. If you'd stick around online, we've got a little special edition with Speaker McCutcheon you might want to watch. Thank you for watching The V. You watch us, because we watch them. Welcome back to The V, the special session. We're here with our extended interview with Speaker of the House, McCutcheon.
Good to have you, Bill. Good to have you in the People's House.
Always good. We've got so much to talk about, and always limited for time, so I appreciate you sticking around for this.
Oh, yeah.
There were several important bills that passed this session. There were some that were emotional. There were some that were very practical. And all of them had their own opposition. Mm-hmm. I think, and you and I have talked about this before, something that people sometimes fail to realize is the compassion that's in the conservative movement. They don't see Republicans a lot of times, especially Democrats will point out that Republicans are less compassionate than they are. And I'm not sure that's true at all. But this autism bill showed the real compassion, as it just passed overwhelmingly.
Yes, it did. It was, and the bill took some work to get to the point that we were ready to get it to the floor. I'm very appreciative of the sponsor. But this has been a work that's been in place for several years, the autism issue.
Right.
We've had the opportunity to look at the treatment and how valuable it is to have early intervention,
Sure.
ABA therapy for the children, with autism, and we saw the school situation where you've got these children that are in the school system, and the school system is having to pay out funding for special needs classes and to try to help get these children educated, and just the overall burden of the parent who's trying to hold down a job and take care of their family and take care of these children. And the numbers are growing. Our autistic children numbers are growing. The more technology we have, the more we can make this diagnosis. I mean, it had gotten to the point to where the numbers were great enough that the legislature needed to address this.
Right.
So.
And it's one of those things, and I know I heard this argument, it was a very good one. You can either pay now and help these people live a productive life where they can be a part of the system, or you can wait till later when the state will have to take care of them absolutely all the time. And
Well, sure, and that's true. Another issue that came out of this was the Medicaid issue.
Right.
Under law, the Medicaid actually has a program to be taking care of the autistic children, but it was lacking in its efficiency and its approach to the therapy portion.
Okay.
And so out of this has come now a serious, we backed up as a state and took a serious look at what the federal law requires versus how these children are being taken care of. And you know as well as I do that a huge number of our Medicaid patients are children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think this is going to provide for us some huge dividends down the road, because these children, you know, you stop and look at these children. Some of these children are brilliant, and
absolutely,
and they can be very productive if given the proper treatment.
Well, and that's it. You know, it's to help them live a productive life. I mean, we're as a people investing in our neighbors' children or our own, you know, so that they do better, and if they do better, we do better.
Yeah, one of the major sticking points was the fact that we needed the pool size. When I say pool, the number of participants in the program.
Right.
We needed that to be large enough so that the change in the insurance premium would not be so astronomical that you couldn't afford to pay it. And by doing it the way we did, it included everybody. And I made some personal calls to some insured entities around the state, some local governments and cities, municipalities, and I just asked them, I said, you know, if your employees were asked to pay more on their insurance premium, would they be willing to do this to try to help see some autistic children? And overwhelmingly, they told me, they said, sure, we can't afford to pay $50 to $100 a year more, I mean a month more, but if it's reasonable, we'll be glad to help.
Sure. And that, you know, that's the spirit of cooperation that we really need here, and sometimes is lacking. I know one of the things you have not demanded people vote your way, but have you know, sort of shepherded the people along, and how has that worked? I mean, you know, we've had speakers who just said you either vote this way or not, or else, but you don't take that tactic. You kind of put people in a situation, explain it to them, and see how it works out.
I would like to think that it's worked well. I know we finished the session, and I've received a lot of calls from a lot of members saying, you know, Mr. Speaker, you were fair to us. You did what you said you was going to do, and you let us represent our districts. And that made me feel very good, because that's exactly what I've tried to do. I went back and I read previous speakers' methods and how they operated, and there were some speakers that would take sides with the governor and push the governor's agenda through the session. There's some speakers that had their own agenda, and they would try to push their own agenda through. And then there were speakers that had the same method as I'm trying to take, and that is to let the process work. We have a democratic process.
Right.
And every member that sits in these chairs, I sit there in that chair and I watch them, and I think to myself, every session day, this thought crosses my mind, that member represents 40,000 people plus.
Right.
And that member, that representative, is their voice. And I need to do everything I can to try to keep the process moving, but also allow them to have a voice for those people. And that's just two things that I hold very dear.
Well, and a perfect example of that was that when it came to reapportionment, there couldn't have been anything that was more divisive in that. But you let the Democrats, especially the Black Caucus, really have their say, and sometimes it got contentious, but it worked out in the end.
Well, it did, and I went back and looked in history. Every reapportionment issue we've ever had on the House had to be cloture, whether the Democrats were in control or the Republicans, because it is so contentious. You're talking about the districts.
Right.
You're talking about keeping counties whole. You're talking about the voting populace as, being the deviation between districts. So, I mean, when you look at all of those issues, I knew it was going to be a contentious issue. But then again, let's have as much debate on it as possible.
Right.
Yeah. The biggest obstacle we had in that was the bill was so long, and there was a point to where I myself got a little frustrated because that was 15 hours of downtime at the end of the session, and I had a special order calendar with some good bills on it that we needed to address. So it was a trade-off there to work through it.
Listen, if we heard Block 65, Block 67, I was like, do we care? I mean, and that was a point that came up a little bit. That rule about reading the bill at length, a lot of that came into being when there were times where there weren't copiers, and people didn't have a copy of everything. They couldn't go to their computer and download it. And let's face it, the literacy rate wasn't all that great either. Yeah. So I've heard people question, is that really something that we need? Because it's a stalling tactic. It's not like people are going to learn anything from hearing that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or thinking about it at all.
And really, you've pretty well stated exactly what I'm thinking about it. Is there was a time that it was needed, but I think with today's technology and the information that we have and the process by which we print the bills, and there's no information that cannot be distributed to every member and have right in front of them at the time that they need it. When you look at all of those things, I think that the reading of the bill may be a little outdated, and we might need to address that. But then again, it's a tactic. You have cloture, and then you have reading of the bills. So it's just another part of the rules.
Yeah, and that's it. Do you want to really change the rules because the majority is going to be the minority one day, and it all just changes. If there's one memory of this session that comes to mind or stands out most in your mind, what would it be?
I think it's probably going to be the last day of the session. The 29th day was a very, very contentious day, and there were a lot of emotions. There was a lot of frustration. Members were tired because they had worked a lot of long hours, and there was some real issues that had come up this session that in some ways we had no control over.
Right.
The impeachment issue.
Sure.
We were coming off of a speaker that had been convicted, from the special session, and so there were just a lot of issues out there that we had to work through. But to finish on the 30th day, the way we finished, and everybody was shaking hands when the session ended. We were laughing. We had the Shroud Award. There was a sense of unity there. Everybody had their differences, but at the end of the day, we came together and we had a good session. It reinforced my confidence in the members that, hey, we can do good things, when we're willing to work together. And I think that's what I take away from it.
Well, and that seems to be the case. The last day was, it was a marathon. I mean, it was actually a sprint to the end, I guess would be more like it. Well, you think we're going to have a special session to address prisons or infrastructure?
I think it's a good possibility, and I say that not having heard anything from the governor. Of course, this is the governor's call, and she will do accordingly. One of the things that I think is important for us is the fact that we need to hear from the court.
Right.
And let's hear from the court, and and let's see what Judge Thompson is going to require
Right.
of us. By doing that, we can be more focused on what our issues are. We were very close to passing a prison bill.
Right, right.
The House had done a lot of work, and they had taken the Senate version and substituted that. We addressed the women's prison, which was a little different from the Senate. We also had made the locations and the bonding issue more a local issue by municipalities and counties being willing to bid and put together a bond issue for the actual construction part, and then let the state guarantee a lease on the facilities. All of these were some good points and a little different from the Senate, but in the same respect, the Senate was on board with us. So,
Right.
so if we could have just had a little more time, I think we had a bill that we could have passed. But the good thing about that is that let's see what the court says.
Right.
If we go back into a special session, we've already got a product that we can work from, and hopefully we may be able to come up with something. I think the worst thing we can do is to do nothing.
Right, right.
We've got to address this.
Well, it's election season coming up, so we'll see how that all shapes out. Are you excited about getting through that and getting back down to work?
Well, from a speaker's perspective, of course, this is going to be new for me,
Yeah.
and I'll have to learn as I go.
Yeah.
But we want to have a incumbent protection program, and want to work with all the members and their districts. I'm looking forward to being more involved in each representative's district and trying to set up information for them to help them on the campaign trail.
Right.
Prior to that, it was just my district
Right.
and what I was doing, but now I feel like I have a sense of responsibility for all the members. So I'm excited a little bit about that.
So you'll be doing a lot of traveling.
I'll be doing a lot of traveling. If they want me in their district, I'll be there
Yeah.
for them.
Well, I'm sure they'll want you there because we hear the plain talk and the common sense is greatly appreciated around the state.
Oh, good. That's good. That's
Well,
good.
thank you for joining us. You're always welcome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
You've been watching the extended version of the Voice of Alabama Politics special session in the House with Speaker McCutcheon.